We really loved the response to our last video. We were blown away by the likes and the comments and the shares. We're happy that this is landing with people. So please continue the support and let us know in the comments as you're listening any feedback you might have or any ideas or associations that are brought up by this talk. Today, we're going to be talking about validation in the workplace. Adi, you want to tell us a little bit about this topic?
Sure. I just want to mention to our viewers that I'm also doing emergency coverage for the hospital that I work in. So I don't think anything will happen, but just in case I suddenly have to log out and deal with an emergency, please forgive me. So we're talking about validation because that word is kind of a buzzword and it could be quite confusing for people because you might have the best intentions and the desire to make someone feel understood and accepted, which is what validation is, and inadvertently actually make them feel rejected or misunderstood. And I think what we want to do today is make sure that you understand what is going on when you talk to someone and how to invite them to share more and make sure that they feel that you understood them while also understanding yourself, validating your own needs and desires, and being able to deliver messages that might not be that comfortable for you or for those others without making them feel lost in the process.
Yeah, I think especially in the mental health industry where we both work, I think workplaces tend to be over validating. It's a skill that we're taught as therapists. And, I'll do this a lot as you get to know me. I will compare what we do to everybody else, often favorably. Is
Yep.
when I see other therapists over validating, other leaders over validating, there's kind of this line between validating and agreeing. So
Mhm.
when we say validation, the way that I understand it is the idea of allowing someone to have their experience without changing it. You don't actually have to agree with it or think that it's the right experience or that it's the same experience that you're having, or even that it's really like appropriate to the situation. There's this sense where the merger doesn't quite have to happen. So you can validate someone's feelings of being upset, feeling angry, feeling disappointed first, and then move towards a solution. But do you want to talk a little about that
Absolutely.
insulation? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought it up because one important thing about validation is you only have to validate the valid. There's no need to offer kind of an agreement with something that isn't true. So if I'm angry at Mark because he ate the last piece of cake and he didn't, then he doesn't have to apologize for eating the last piece of cake. He can validate me by saying, I can see that you're angry, and I would be angry too if I thought somebody ate my cake and I didn't eat it. So you don't need to validate what is actually not true. You only have to respond to the emotional and perspective reality of the other person in a way that respects it when you want to validate. And I want to make a little distinction because validation is very different than cheerleading and problem solving. Those are two different things. And they all have their values. However, when we cheerlead someone, for example, saying, that's not too bad, you can do this, I believe in you, that's great. People need to hear that sometimes. And when you do that, the message that you're giving the other person is don't feel how you're feeling. You are feeling too much of what you're feeling. Your perspective of this reality might be exaggerated. How about you see the problem as smaller? Now, although that could be really helpful at times, it also is not validating. Validating is telling the other person about the same problem. I totally get why you would feel scared, angry, confused about what's going on. And also, validation is not problem solving. Problem solving will look like something. Did you think of doing that? Maybe you can do that. How about da 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 da? And again, that's very helpful. That's wonderful. And usually, both cheerleading and problem solving comes from the best of places, from the desire to support whoever is having a problem or a strong emotion. However, often, and I'm sure you've seen it happening in your life, when you come with cheerleading and with problem solving, the person who's coming with the problem will actually double down. Be like, no, you don't understand. I can't do this. Because you telling them that there is a solution or that they can do it might make them feel misunderstood. And in an attempt to be understood, they will double down on trying to prove to you that their emotions are valid. So before you problem solve, before you cheerlead, might be very effective to offer validation. So I wanted to make that clear, that you know the difference between those um, different attempts to support others.
Yeah, I think that's a phenomenal point. As a leader, I know I struggled in the beginning to understand that the primary need in many of these circumstances is just to be understood. It's not to get to a solution, it's not to make things better, it's just to establish that bond of connection and that bond of trust. And, from my experience in the mental health industry, I found, and it's paradoxical, it was hard for me to grok in a while, maybe because of how I was raised. Some leaders might be in a similar thing, that joining with the feeling, validating with the feeling, actually moves it forward, actually is the thing that helps it move out of that hurt place. I think a lot of us were raised, at least I was raised to believe that, cheer me up, like to tell a joke or to, get my mind off of things or to, try to switch the way I'm thinking about it, like go work out, like a lot of these coping strategies, which were around shifting my mental state instead of actually feeling what I'm feeling and then allowing it to shift naturally. So as leaders, we are able to do that with our employees and with our teams by validation.
Exactly. And I think what you're bringing up, which is a very important point, is that there are barriers to validation due to the beliefs that we come with. So a lot of people believe that if they validate, they will actually give a stamp of approval to unacceptable behavior or to an opinion that they don't agree with, or that if they validate someone, it will just increase whatever it is that they're seeing. So, say that someone is very angry and you want them to stop being angry, there might be a fear, if I validate them, they'll just continue. That is not true. The research and just anecdotal things that I see with my patients and my peers is that when you validate, those emotions actually dissipate. Because we make room for them, paradoxically, they don't need that much room anymore. So, actually, if somebody is really angry and you say to them, I would totally be angry too. From your perspective, I can totally see why that would be aggravating. You will be surprised how they be once they feel validated, how they actually relax, calm down, facial expression might be a little softer, the tension in the body might relax. And I think what one thing that we can do today is give a few tips about how to do it, because there are different ways to validate that are applicable in different times. And at the same time, I always want to remind people that you can also validate yourself. It requires a little bit of like being mindful of what's going on for you internally. And that is the part where, when we talked in the beginning, of not losing sight of your own mission, of your own needs, and the goals for your organization. You don't want to just validate and stop at that. You want to make sure that needs are being taken care of and you are progressing somewhere. And that might sometimes mean that you can't do what the other person wants you to do. Doing what the other person wants you to do doesn't necessarily mean validation. That's not necessarily so. If you have any comments about
Yeah,
that.
I'll tell a little about that, and then we can dive to some of the tips. Because I think over validation or over agreeing is another problem, right? It's the other side of the coin, where leaders can be, for lack of a better term, pushovers, right? Where they are just, responding to every single crisis and moving very quickly. That actually, again, paradoxically, you might think as a leader that you are helping your people and responding to their needs, but it actually makes the workplace incredibly unsafe because as a leader, you're not stable anymore. The employees will pick up that, you can flip flop, that you're more wiggly, that it's very squishy, it's very loose, and it's hard if the rules are always changing, right? It's hard to feel very safe in the game. Um, so there is
Exactly.
this balance of like holding the structure, holding the mission, but adapting. And one really quick tip that I use in all of my meetings, and I really encourage people to do, it's really simple but really powerful, is every single meeting, every single conflict resolution should end with a next action. Every single thing that you do should end with like, okay, we've gone through this emotional process. What is the very, very next baby step that we can do to make this move forward? Maybe it's sending an email, maybe it's having another meeting, maybe it's changing a policy, maybe it's doing research, but something that shows you and the person that there's progress being made. And over time, when that becomes part of the culture, there's this idea of like, yes, there is time for emotions for sure, there's time for validation for sure, there's all this open space, and we're going to be moving forward. The goal of these conversations is to create action, and the goal of the conversations is to move the needle forward, even just a little bit. It helps actually structure the way these conversations tend to go down, so they don't become gossip, or they don't become gripe sessions, or they don't become, kind of these black holes of complaining, which I think is, the other side of having a workplace that is too much focused on emotional processing and not focused on structural change and progress.
Absolutely. And I think if you validate the emotions, you can then deliver news that maybe certain people will not like much more effectively. And I love what you're saying, because I think sometimes some supervisors have such a difficult time accepting anger toward them or frustration toward them. And we need to know as supervisor that we're kind of like the representative of the organization or the company, and therefore whatever is not the desired decision for the employees, we're going to get some heat for that. And us being able to tolerate it and being able to accept that maybe not everybody's going to like us in that moment will actually in the long run make us more likable leaders, because like you said, we'll be safe, we'll have integrity, and we'll give a message that even when someone is angry at us, we are able to be compassionate, considerate, and still strong with our opinion. So why don't we talk about a couple of ways in which we can validate? Um, I can start with just the simplest one. Verbal validation is very simple. Just making the other person feel heard is a level of validation that's very effective. And you can do that by repeating what you heard and saying, I hear what you're saying. You're saying that this is making you angry and anxious, that we're going to move forward that way. Um, Maybe you can verbally also add a level of understanding, of saying, because you have some knowledge maybe about the person who's talking to you, maybe you know their history, adding a little bit of something that shows that you understand their perspective. So saying like, knowing that last week you were given extra work and you had a really stressful week because of it, I can totally understand why me telling you that you're going to have to take on another piece of the work will make you feel anxious. So showing that you have some knowledge about the person, which explains why that person will feel how they feel, will probably make them feel very validated and seen. So that verbal communication can be just one way of inviting the other person to the conversation in a validating way.
Yeah, and I'll talk about structural validation. So, when I talked about that next action, this is taking it to kind of the next level, is I believe a lot in transparency as part of a healthy organizational culture. It's one of the things that's way easier said than done. It often takes a long time to get to a truly transparent culture. But I've seen in my work it be incredibly effective with a team that has a lot of trust and safety. So in a way, in the spirit of transparency, I believe in using systems like Agile, using tools like Trello to make objects and projects public, right? Or make them public within the team. So for instance, if you are coming to me with a complaint, right, or with an issue around the way that we're working on a product, I can immediately, as a leader, add that to our public agenda and show it as an issue that is taken seriously, an issue that will be given time during a leadership meeting or during a stand-up, making sure that there's follow-up on some of the issues that are raised. It can really help the employees or your team members feel validated and feel like their issues are being taken seriously and that there's time being devoted. I know as an employee, it can feel really disheartening to go to your superior and say something that's often very vulnerable and then feel like it's just like going into a dark hole, to feel like it's not going to be ever talked about again. Nothing's going to change. You just took this big emotional risk and, what's the point? So if you can make some of these agendas public and actually share them with your leadership team or share them with the team that you're managing, it's like showing them that action is going to be taken and this issue is not resolved and it's being worked on in real time.
I couldn't agree more. I think verbal validation is very valuable and at times can actually feel invalidating. For example, if I'm in a burning building and the firefighters are standing downstairs and they're yelling for me, it looks really hot up there, that's not validating. It's almost condescending. So sometimes true validation has to be followed with an action. Where I work, we were talking about how unsafe we feel. I live in New York, I work in New York City, I live in Brooklyn, I work in Manhattan. We talked about how unsafe the subway feels. And pretty soon after, we were the system adjusted and we started working mainly from home. So that was an action taken by our leadership that showed us that our feelings were validated. Even if they said many, many times that they understand our anxiety, however, demanded that we come physically to work when patients are actually being seen by telehealth, it wouldn't have felt as validating. However, if that decision was made and there was a rationale behind it, then verbal validation could be helpful. Validating how we feel and the transparency that you talk about, telling us why was the decision made that still exposes us to the stimulus that is causing us the anxiety, the anger, whatever it is. That might allow us to accept a difficult decision by administration with more grace, with more acceptance, than if we just get a message of like, well, yeah, we totally understand you feel that way, and we're not going to respond to it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's really critical, and I think especially in larger top-heavy organizations, it often takes a long time to make a policy decision. So being transparent about those processes can be very helpful because people that are more on the front lines might be confused. Might be like, look, I'm really suffering here, but I don't know why this isn't changing. I've told you X amount of times. And as leaders, it actually requires some humility on our part to be like, well, here's the process. I have to talk to corporate and then they have to get approval and then we have to talk to the backers. I mean, it's often way more complicated. And sharing a bit of that and sharing like, think of it like a board game, like where your piece is on the square, where it's moving forward and making that public information can actually help to reassure, employees or team members that, it's being taken seriously and that the ball is moving.
And I do want to say that one way that's really important in which we validate others is if we do take action, that the action will match the problem at hand. So if somebody says, I'm very angry at you, we had an agreement, like say that you have a roommate or a partner, you said that you'll clean the house and the house is not clean, and the person says, you're totally right, I did say that and I didn't clean, here's a pizza. That is an action that doesn't address the problem at hand. So when whatever level of validation you choose, be that being verbally affirmative, showing that you have knowledge of the individual and their history, or actually taking action, it has to match what the person is talking about and what it is that they're bringing to the table. So in a lot of places, and it's wonderful, there are all these nice perks, like there's coffee maybe, or maybe there are cookies on Friday, and that's lovely and wonderful. However, under these new circumstances of COVID, when people actually feel that their physical safety is at risk, that is not a validating action. It could be a supportive action. It could be really nice. The people who are delivering it need to know what they're doing. So if you want to kind of spoil your employees and give a little bit of a perk, then use verbal validation saying, I know that it doesn't addresses what you were talking about in team meeting. I know that that's not going to fix that problem. We just wanted to show our appreciation or make it a little nicer for you to come to work, whatever it is. You need to combine those levels of validation to make the other person feel that you understand, that you really truly see things from their perspective, even if you can't do anything about it.
Yeah, it's this open willingness to step into the emotion and to feel it too. I think it's a big topic for a future episode, but mindfulness is really important. I think having a large emotional range and a large emotional tolerance is really important. As leaders, a lot of our job is to hold the emotions of our team. And that means validating and stepping into things like COVID fear, things like fear of physical safety, things like, disappointment, upset, anger, rage, being able to hold those with skillful means and not taking them seriously or not taking them personally. Right. That is something where organizational development can help you, where psychotherapy can help you, where executive coaching can help you to really kind of expand your bandwidth of the amount of emotion that you can tolerate so that you can be, one, more stable in your life, and two, a better service to your company and your team. So, Adi, as we're wrapping up, any final thoughts?
I really love what you're saying. I'm excited for future episodes where we can talk about that more. I think in our field, that emotional bandwidth is much more in the focal point, and maybe for people that are more corporate, it actually is something that is unfamiliar because the sense is like we're supposed to be unemotional, And that could be to the detriment of the functional life in the organization. So just excited to talk about it more in the future. Hope that everybody is safe where they are.
Very cool. I know it's a weird time out there. As we're wrapping up, I want to give a quick shout out to Danny. Danny, hey, hope you're still tuning in. Thanks for joining us. I know you were a big motivation in getting these things off the ground. And yeah, it's been a while, but we're back online. So for those of you that are joining in either live or joining in, watching a replay, let us know how this went. Let us know if you have any questions, if any of these topics you want us to expand upon. Every time me and Adi talk, we always say that there's so much to talk about. And we're working on narrowing down and being able to present things in easy to digest formats. But every time we talk, I know my mind is buzzing with different ideas, different places of ways to go. So we're going to be doing this for quite a while. So let us know, like it, comment, share, share to people who think that might find it helpful.
Yeah, we want to hear from you. We want to make sure that this is useful for you and for your needs.
Fantastic. Well, take care, everybody, and we'll see you again next Friday.
Bye.